Hello and welcome to this Silverstripe screencast. In this tutorial we're going to be talking about the holder/page pattern. So what we'll begin with is just an introduction to what that is, and then we'll move on to creating a new pair of page types that will represent the holder and the page, and then we'll work with some hierarchical constraints in the site tree. So we're going to be focusing on the travel guide section of our website for this topic, and as we can see in the designs, there are two templates required for this section. There's a list view, or what you might call a hub page, and a detail page. This is one of the most common patterns in web content used throughout the web. Think of something like news listings or image galleries. A Twitter timeline might use this pattern. And to accomplish this in Silverstripe, we're going to use a very common convention. The idea is simple. One page is going to manage the list view, and that usually contains very little of its own native content. The primary function of this page is just to list out all of its child pages and provide a brief summary of each one, along with a link to the detail page. A second page type will represent the detail view for any given child page, which will typically have a custom template and some content fields that make it unique. By convention, the list view and the detail view have certain suffixes that we're going to use for the class name. We'll use holder and page, respectively. Now for our content, we're going to be dealing with articles. So for us, this means that we're going to be using ArticleHolder to represent the holder page and ArticlePage for the detail page. This convention is not enforced by any means, it's just very common in Silverstripe development. Now in our last episode, we've created our first custom page type, which was homepage. We'll repeat that process and create a new page type called ArticleHolder. And just as a recap, we need a PHP file called ArticleHolder.php in our mysite code directory, and that will contain a pair of empty classes like this. We'll do the same thing for ArticlePage. We also need templates for these pages. In your theme directory, copy over the contents from the static ArticleHolder.html into templates/layout/ArticleHolder.ss. And do the same thing for ArticlePage.html into ArticlePage.ss. Now, take careful note that our designer has made things a lot easier for us by including only what belongs in our layout template. We don't have all that Chrome around it anymore. But we still have to add some common variables. So before we go any further, let's add the title, content, and breadcrumbs to their appropriate places. For the ArticleHolder page, we don't really have any content because it's just going to be showing all of the child pages. Now, while we're at it, I do see that we can probably clean things up a bit by moving the breadcrumbs into their own include. So let's cut that out and put it into something called banner.ss, since this represents sort of a banner of the template. And remember to do that to your page.ss as well, which also uses breadcrumbs. The home page does not use breadcrumbs, so we don't need to update that template. Since we've created two new page types and two new templates, we need to build the database and flush the template cache before proceeding. We can do this all at once by visiting dev/build?flush in the browser. We should see some blue text showing that sitetree.className was updated to include the new page types ArticlePage and ArticleHolder. Now let's go into the CMS and add these new page types to the site tree. This is probably a good time to build out the primary navigation of our site. Build out this structure with the following titles and their page types. Now note that in order to get the About Us page to the bottom, we have to use some drag and drop. So we've got our new ArticleHolder page in place, so let's just create some child pages underneath it. These should use the new page type ArticlePage. We can feel free to title them any way we like and just put in some dummy content for now. Let's get back to our site, and we'll go to the travel guide section. This looks good, but obviously we don't want static content here. We need these articles to reflect the child pages in this section. So to accomplish this, we use a template method that is afforded to all pages in the site tree called children. This method returns a list of all the pages whose parent is the current page. And because this returns a list, we're going to be using a loop control. When we step into a loop, the scope of all the variables is set to the current iteration of the loop. That is to say, the $title variable inside the loop will not return the title of the current page, travel guides, but rather the titles of each child page. So let's go through the loop and replace any static content with variables that we know to exist on the child pages. So we can replace the title with $title, and any links to this blog-detail HTML can be replaced with $link. And everything else can be left static for now. I know it looks like a lot, but we'll get to that later. Note that any pages that have Show in Menus unchecked in the CMS will be hidden. To show all the children regardless of their Show in Menus state, we can use All Children. There's a lot left undone on this page, and we'll just leave it as static, especially everything in the sidebar. We'll be picking that apart over the course of several tutorials. For now, let's just refresh the page and see that we're generating some dynamic content. Try clicking on a link and see if it takes you to a detail page for the article. Now that we've created these two page types, we can start applying some hierarchical constraints in the CMS. Now, to get an idea of what this means, we have to remember that what we're building is an experience for our content editor. It's really easy to forget as a developer sometimes because you're just so focused on getting front-end functionality to work as it's supposed to, but one of the hallmarks of a great CMS developer is his or her attention to the user experience in the CMS. So let's take a moment to assume the role of a content author and imagine that we want to create a new article. Going through this process, we can see two glaring usability hazards. First of all, the user can add an article page anywhere in the site tree. It could be at the root, it could be under the home page, it could be anywhere. And also, when adding a child page to the travel guide section, the user has to know to choose article page and not something else, like home page. Fortunately, Silverstripe offers an API for hierarchical constraints that will enforce the pattern that we require. So let's start by ensuring that only article page can be created underneath the travel guide section. So we'll go to our ArticleHolder class, and we'll add this static variable, private static allowed children, and we'll set that to an array containing article page only. Now this variable does just what it sounds like. It's a list of all the page types that are allowed to be created under this one. Note that a scalar value is also acceptable here if you only have one page type. Now there's a bit of an oddity that we need to recover when modifying private static class variables. In Silverstripe, private statics are functionally the same as updates to the config YAML files, which is to say that we could have just as easily applied our allowed children setting to the config file like this. Whichever way you choose is a matter of preference. Historically, these types of common settings on pages have been set as static variables, as the config API wasn't introduced until version 3. So for consistency, it might make sense to use these static variables in this case, but again, it's functionally identical, so it's up to you. Now, because of this overlap, just like in the config API, private static variable changes do not apply until we flush the cache. If it seems odd to you that you have to flush the cache after making a simple change to your class declaration, that's a good sign. You're completely normal. This is an idiosyncrasy of the Silverstripe framework, and without getting into the specifics in this tutorial, suffice it to say it's just one of those things you have to remember. So let's just flush the cache by appending $flush to the URL, and we'll go back into the CMS. Now try adding an incorrect page type under travel guides. Notice that the dropdown is forcing the article page type on us. Now that works great, but what about pages at the root level? There's no real page type for the root, so we can't specify allowed children there. For this, we can use the Boolean variable can_be_root for our article page class, and then flush the cache. Now if we try to create an article page at the root level of the site tree, the action is disallowed. It feels much more forgiving for the user, and it's also more streamlined and efficient. Thanks for tuning into this screencast. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below.